What if I told you that one of the world's greatest empires, Britain, once reached a moment so desperate, so financially broken, that it turned to an unexpected source of rescue? A small Middle Eastern nation whose wealth it did not yet control, a nation whose resources would eventually reshape global politics, and whose money Britain seized long before oil ever entered the picture. This isn't the story you were taught in school. It's not about colonization in the traditional sense. It's about finance, desperation, and a secret deal that laid the foundations for a century of conflict between Iran, Britain, and eventually the entire West. How did a bankrupt Britain take Iran's wealth? Why did it happen, and why does its impact still echo in global politics today? The answers reveal a shocking truth, one that begins long before the discovery of oil, and long before the world understood how powerful a nation's financial system truly is. To understand what Britain did to Iran, you must first understand where Britain stood at the end of the 19th century. The British Empire looked strong on maps, red ink, covering continents from Africa to Asia. But beneath that surface, Britain was drowning in debt, losing industrial competitiveness, and struggling to finance the largest empire in human history. By the late 1800s, Britain's navy required massive funding. India, once its cash cow, was no longer generating enough. Russia threatened British interests in Central Asia, and political crises were forcing Britain to take costly military actions around the world. Simply put, Britain looked wealthy, but its treasury was bleeding. Meanwhile, to the east, another nation was fighting for survival, a nation whose weakness made it a perfect target. Iran, a once great empire reduced by civil wars, foreign invasions, and economic collapse. But Iran had something Britain desperately needed: resources, revenue, and a strategic location between Britain and Russian expansion. And so the stage was set: a financially collapsing Britain on one side, a politically collapsing Iran on the other. What happened next would reshape the Middle East forever. In the late 1800s, Iran needed money to survive. Britain needed influence to maintain its empire. And Britain had mastered a particular tool to get what it wanted: debt diplomacy. Instead of invading a country, you could lend it money, and once the repayments began, you controlled the nation's economy without firing a single shot. This technique had already worked in Egypt, where financial control eventually led to occupation. Now Britain turned its eyes to Iran. Iran's rulers, desperate for cash, began granting concessions contracts, giving foreigners the rights to build railroads, operate mines, run banks, and collect taxes. Each concession weakened Iran's financial independence. Each agreement handed more economic power to outsiders, and Britain was always at the center of it. But nothing compared to the concession Iran was about to sign, one that would create the largest transfer of wealth in Iranian history. This deal was created not by a government, but by a single British spy and entrepreneur. His name, William Knox D'Arcy. In 1901, William Knox D'Arcy, a man with no expertise in oil, approached Iran's monarch, Mozaffar ad-Din Shah, with an offer. Britain knew Iran was financially desperate. The Shah needed money for foreign trips, military spending, and personal luxuries. He was drowning in debt to Russia, France, and Britain. So D'Arcy proposed what seemed like easy money, in exchange for £20,000 in cash, £20,000 in shares, and 16% of future profits. Iran would grant Britain exclusive rights to search for oil across 75% of the entire country for 60 years. Let that sink in. For the price of a luxurious London townhouse, Britain gained access to what would become one of the largest oil reserves on Earth. But here's the twist. At the time, nobody knew whether Iran even had oil. The British government quietly backed D'Arcy because they believed two things. 1. Iran was too weak to negotiate properly. 2. Britain desperately needed a new source of revenue and energy. And so the deal was signed not based on proven oil, but on Britain's financial desperation, and its growing fear that the age of coal was ending. For 7 years, D'Arcy searched and found nothing. He lost almost all his money. Just as he was about to quit, the British government stepped in. They knew their navy's future depended on oil, not coal, so they funded the last attempt. In 1908, oil gushed from the ground in southwest Iran. It was the moment that saved the British Empire, and it was the moment Iran lost control of its wealth. Once oil was discovered, Britain moved with incredible speed. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company (APOC) was created. Britain bought a controlling majority. The company paid Iran pennies on the dollar, and Iranian oil fueled Britain's navy, industry, and global power. Winston Churchill, First Lord of the Admiralty, made a decision that would change the world. The British Navy would convert from coal to Iranian oil. This created a direct dependence. No Iranian oil equals no British Empire. So the British government took full control. APOC grew into one of the world's largest corporations, the forerunner of today's BP. Meanwhile, Iran received almost nothing compared to the immense profits Britain earned. By the 1930s, Iranian politicians and the public were furious. The concession, originally seen as a lifeline, had become a symbol of humiliation. But Iran had something Britain didn't expect: a new, nationalist leader who demanded economic independence. His name was Reza Shah. Reza Shah forced renegotiations, reduced British control, and demanded a fairer deal. Britain responded with pressure, threats, and political manipulation. Still, Iranian resistance grew. And then came the breaking point, the moment Iran tried to reclaim its wealth, and Britain struck back with overwhelming force. By the late 1940s, the world had changed. Colonial empires were collapsing. Nations demanded independence, and Iran's new Prime Minister, Mossadegh, was ready to challenge Britain head-on. He attempted what no country had successfully done before: nationalize its own oil, take back what Britain had taken for decades. For the first time in history, a Middle Eastern nation said, "Our resources belong to us, not to foreign companies." The reaction from Britain was immediate and brutal. Britain imposed an international oil embargo, froze Iranian assets, blocked tankers, sent warships to the Persian Gulf, lobbied the World Bank to cut Iran off, and initiated a global propaganda campaign to portray Iran as chaotic and dangerous. Britain's economy depended on Iranian oil. Losing it would be a national disaster. But Mossadegh refused to back down. So Britain escalated to its final option: regime change. With help from the CIA, Britain launched Operation Ajax in 1953, overthrowing Mossadegh and installing a more compliant monarchy under the Shah. And with that, Britain regained control not only of Iran's oil, but of its political future for the next 25 years. The economic wealth Iran tried to reclaim was once again taken by foreign hands. The fallout would shape the Middle East-US foreign policy and Iran's internal politics for generations. By the 1970s, Iran was once again pushing back. The Shah had modernized the country with oil revenue. But resentment was boiling beneath the surface. Resentment toward foreign control, inequality, and political suppression. In 1979, the Iranian Revolution erupted. British oil operations collapsed overnight. APOC, now called British Petroleum, lost its grip forever. And for the first time in nearly 80 years, Iran fully reclaimed its wealth. But the story didn't end there. Britain froze Iranian assets. International sanctions followed. Iran's financial system became isolated, its economy crippled, and much of the wealth it tried to reclaim remained locked away in Western banks. A century after Britain first exploited Iran's desperation, Iran was still paying the price. The shocking part is this: the technique Britain used, financial pressure, asset seizures, economic coercion, didn't disappear. It evolved. Today, over $100 billion of Iranian assets remain frozen abroad. Oil exports are controlled by sanctions. Foreign exchange reserves can be blocked instantly with a keystroke. Financial institutions like SWIFT can cut nations off from global banking. Major powers still use economic leverage instead of direct colonization. The pattern is the same. Control a nation's money gives control its destiny. And it's not just Iran. Russia had hundreds of billions frozen in 2022. Afghanistan's central bank funds were seized in 2021. Venezuela's gold reserves were blocked in the UK. Libya's assets remain under foreign administration. The tools have changed from concessions and oil contracts to sanctions and financial blacklisting, but the strategy remains identical. Economic pressure is the new empire, and its origins can be traced back to the moment a bankrupt Britain needed Iran's wealth to survive. Takeaway number 1. Economic weakness shapes political behavior. Britain wasn't acting from strength, it acted from desperation, using Iran's resources to save itself. Takeaway number 2. Financial dependence is more powerful than military occupation. Once a country relies on foreign money, it risks losing control of its resources, politics, and future. Takeaway number 3. History repeats through new technologies. Where Britain once used debt and concessions, today's powers use sanctions, frozen assets, and global banking systems to achieve the same goals. The story of Britain and Iran isn't just a chapter of history. It's a blueprint, a reminder that nations lose their wealth not only on battlefields, but in negotiations, contracts, banks, and trade policies. And if history teaches us anything, it's that once a powerful country learns how to take another nation's wealth, it rarely stops after the first success. If you found this story eye-opening, share it with someone who still thinks global power is only about armies and territory, because the real battles today are fought with money. And if you want more deep cinematic documentaries like this one, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell me which country's economic story I should uncover next. Thanks